I was deep in sleep when the sudden, relentless pounding on my front door jolted me awake. My heart pounded in my chest, disoriented by the abrupt interruption to my peaceful rest. For a moment, I thought I was dreaming. Who in their right mind would be knocking at my door this early? I squinted at my bedside clock, my groggy eyes barely making out the bright red digits. 5:03 a.m. My brain struggled to catch up with reality. No one knocks on someone's door this early unless it's an emergency, right? My mind raced through the possibilities. Was there a fire? A break-in? A lost pet? A neighbor in distress? I threw off the covers, stumbling toward the door in a daze, my irritation growing with every heavy-handed knock. Whoever it was, they weren't giving up any time soon. I swung the door open, ready to reprimand whoever had the audacity to wake me up at this ungodly hour, only to come face to face with Karen, the entitled neighbor from down the street. The mere sight of her instantly soured my mood. Karen was notorious in our neighborhood for her inflated sense of entitlement, constantly demanding special treatment, as if the world owed her something. She was the type who would throw a fit if someone parked too close to her house, or if she wasn't given priority in line at the grocery store. Just seeing her standing there, arms crossed and foot tapping impatiently, was enough to set off alarm bells in my head. This was not going to be good. She didn't even wait for me to speak. The moment my face appeared in the doorway, she demanded in an irritated, self-righteous tone, "I need the keys to your garage." I blinked. What? I must have still been half asleep because her words didn't quite register. I frowned, rubbing my temples, trying to make sense of what I had just heard. Excuse me? My voice was groggy, laced with confusion. Karen let out an exaggerated sigh, as if I were the unreasonable one for not immediately handing over my property to her. "I need the keys to your garage. Now. My son just got his first car, and we don't have space in our driveway. Your garage is just sitting there, so we'll be using it." I stared at her, fully awake now. Was she serious? This had to be some kind of joke. No one in their right mind would show up at someone's doorstep at 5 a.m., demanding access to their personal property like it was their right. I let out a dry laugh, assuming she was playing some ridiculous prank. Yeah, no, that's not happening. Karen's eyes widened, as if I had just slapped her across the face. What do you mean, no? Your garage is empty. You don't even park your car in it. Meanwhile, my son just got his license, and we need the space. It's only fair. Fair? Fair? I shook my head, taking a deep breath to keep my frustration in check. Karen, it's my garage, my private property. Just because I don't park a car in it doesn't mean it's free for the taking. Karen let out an exasperated huff and waved her hand dismissively. Oh, come on. It's not like you're using it for anything important. My son is a responsible young man, and he needs a safe place to park his new car. I crossed my arms, my patience wearing thin. Karen, I don't care what your son needs. That garage belongs to me, and I'm not handing over the keys to you or anyone else. Her expression hardened, and she suddenly switched tactics. You don't have kids, do you? She said in a condescending tone. You don't understand what it's like to be a single mother trying to support her son. I do everything for him, and all I'm asking for is a tiny favor, for you to let us use that space for a while. Is that really so much to ask? There it was, the guilt trip. Classic Karen move. She always played the victim when she didn't get her way. I sighed, pinching the bridge of my nose. Karen, I understand you want to help your son, but this isn't my problem. My garage is not a community storage unit. You should have planned for this before buying him a car. Her eyes narrowed, and her lips pressed into a thin line. You're being incredibly selfish, you know that? The garage is empty. Why do you even care? Oh, that did it. I squared my shoulders, my irritation boiling over. Karen, I do use my garage. It's where I store my tools, my bike, my equipment, my property. It doesn't have to be empty for it to be mine. And even if it was completely empty, that still doesn't give you any right to demand it. Karen's face flushed red and she scoffed. Oh, please. You probably step foot in there once a month. Meanwhile, my son has nowhere to park. We're being forced to park on the street. That's dangerous for a new driver. What if his car gets hit? I shrugged. Not my problem. She gasped, clutching her chest like I had just said something horrifically offensive. Wow. So you really don't care at all about your neighbors, huh? After all I've done for you. I laughed in disbelief. What exactly have you done for me, Karen? She hesitated, eyes darting around as she tried to come up with something. Well, I've always been nice to you. I raised an eyebrow. You mean the time you complained to the HOA about the color of my shutters? Or when you tried to get me fined because you thought my lawn was too long? Or how about the time you yelled at my delivery driver for parking in front of your house for 2 minutes? Karen's jaw tightened and she huffed in frustration. That's not the point. The point is that you don't even use the garage, and my son needs it more than you do. It's just sitting there, wasting space. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. Karen, let me make this crystal clear. I am not giving you my garage keys. Ever. It is my property, and I have every right to use it however I see fit. End of discussion. For a moment, she just stood there, breathing heavily, her face twisted in an ugly expression of disbelief and fury. Then, in a final act of entitlement, she threw out a thinly veiled threat. You will regret this, she hissed. I'll be talking to the HOA about this. Maybe even the city. You're being completely unreasonable. I laughed, shaking my head. Go ahead. Call whoever you want. But I guarantee you, no one is going to side with you on this. Karen glared at me for a moment longer before spinning on her heel and storming off, muttering under her breath. I watched as she stomped back to her house, slamming her front door so hard I was surprised the hinges didn't come off. As I stood there in the quiet morning air, I sighed in exhaustion. This wasn't over. I had a sinking feeling Karen wasn't going to let this go. Little did I know, this was only the beginning of the nightmare. I thought that slamming my door in Karen's face would be the end of it. I was wrong. At first, there was a blessed period of silence. A day passed, then another, and I started to think that maybe, just maybe, Karen had accepted defeat. Maybe she had come to her senses and realized how absurd her request was. Maybe she had found another solution, like clearing out her own garage or making space in her driveway. But, of course, that wasn't how things work with Karen. The trouble began on the third morning after our encounter. I woke up to an unfamiliar rattling sound outside my window. At first, I thought it was just the wind or maybe a raccoon knocking something over. But when I looked outside, I was greeted with a sight that nearly made my blood boil. Karen's son, Jake, was trying to break into my garage. There he was, in broad daylight, crouched down near my garage door with a set of tools in his hands. His fingers fumbled with what looked like a screwdriver, jamming it into the lock as if he had any clue what he was doing. I stood there in stunned disbelief for a solid 3 seconds before anger surged through me like wildfire. Oh, hell no. Without wasting another second, I stormed out of my house barefoot, wearing nothing but sweatpants and a t-shirt. The sheer rage in my steps made me forget the cold morning air biting at my skin. What the hell do you think you're doing? I bellowed. Jake nearly jumped out of his skin. He scrambled backwards so fast that he dropped the screwdriver with a loud clatter. His face went pale, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. I was just, You were just what? I snapped, stepping closer. Trying to break into my garage? On my property? Do you have any idea how illegal this is? Jake's face was a mixture of panic and guilt. But before he could stammer out another excuse, Karen appeared. She came marching down the sidewalk like some kind of righteous warrior, her face twisted in an expression of indignant outrage. What is your problem? She shrieked before I even had a chance to address her son properly. Why are you yelling at my child? Oh, oh. I was about to lose it. Why am I? I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm, even though every fiber of my being wanted to unleash the full force of my anger on her. Your son was breaking into my garage, and you're asking me why I'm yelling. Karen scoffed, rolling her eyes. Oh, don't be so dramatic. He wasn't breaking in. He was just trying to see if the lock was stuck. I stared at her in sheer disbelief. Are you actually hearing yourself right now? He was picking the lock with a screwdriver. That's not checking if it's stuck. That's breaking and entering. She waved a hand dismissively. Oh, please. It's not like he was stealing anything. He was just trying to open it because, honestly, you're being so difficult about this. If you had just let us use the garage in the first place, none of this would be necessary. I took a step back, blinking. Wait, you knew he was doing this. Karen didn't even look the least bit ashamed. In fact, she folded her arms as if she was proud of herself. Of course, I knew. I told him to see if it could be opened. If you won't let us use it, then we'll just have to find a way to make it work. I felt my fingers curl into fists at my sides. The sheer audacity of this woman. Karen, this is trespassing. You just admitted to conspiring to break into my garage. Do you have any idea how serious this is? Karen scoffed again, clearly unbothered. Oh, stop acting like I sent him to rob a bank. It's just a garage. It's not like you're using it for anything important. If anything, you should be grateful we're putting it to good use instead of letting it sit there collecting dust. I could feel my blood pressure skyrocketing. The level of entitlement oozing out of this woman was unfathomable. No, I said, my voice tight. I am not grateful that you tried to steal my property. I am calling the cops. That finally got a reaction out of her. Her face dropped, her confidence faltering for the first time since this ridiculous conversation started. What? No! You can't be serious. I pulled out my phone and started dialing. Watch me. Jake, who had been quiet this entire time, suddenly panicked. Mom, let's go, he hissed, tugging at her sleeve. I don't want to get in trouble. But Karen wasn't backing down. You're really going to call the cops over something this stupid? She snapped, her voice rising in pitch. Yes, I shot back. Because unlike you, I actually respect the law. She let out a dramatic groan, throwing her hands in the air. Oh my God, you're insane. Fine. You want to be a selfish little brat about this? We'll leave. But don't expect us to help you when you need something in the future. I actually laugh. Help me? Karen, you've never helped me with anything. Ever. She huffed, grabbing Jake's arm and dragging him away. Come on, Jake. Let's go. This loser isn't worth our time. I watched as they stomped off, still muttering under their breaths. But I wasn't letting this go. I wasn't bluffing. I actually called the cops. And when they showed up, they were not amused by Karen's antics. As soon as Karen and Jake stormed off, I wasted no time completing my call to the police. I had no intention of letting this slide. This wasn't just about some annoying neighbor being entitled. This was a crime. Jake had actively tried to break into my garage, and Karen had encouraged it. They had crossed a serious line, and I wasn't about to just sit back and let it happen. I explained everything to the dispatcher, making sure to emphasize that I had caught Jake in the act and that Karen had outright admitted to telling him to break in. The dispatcher took my report seriously and assured me that an officer would be sent out to take a statement. I hung up, still fuming, and went inside to review my home security footage. Oh, that's right. I had cameras. My garage, my driveway, and the area surrounding my house were all covered by security cameras. The footage was crystal clear, showing Jake crouching by the garage, attempting to force his way in, while Karen stood down the sidewalk watching. Not only had she known about it, but she had actually been standing guard. The level of entitlement was unbelievable. By the time the officer arrived, I was fully prepared. I handed over my statement, showed him the footage, and made it very clear that I wanted to press charges. The officer sighed as he reviewed everything. "Well," he said, rubbing his forehead, "this isn't just a case of a kid being reckless. Your neighbor was actively involved. This could fall under attempted trespassing, vandalism, and possibly even conspiracy to commit a crime." "Good," I said, arms crossed, "because I'm done with her nonsense." The officer nodded and said they would be heading over to Karen's house next. I was tempted to follow just to see the look on her face when she realized I wasn't bluffing, but I decided to let the law do its thing. About 20 minutes later, I heard the unmistakable sound of Karen shrieking from down the street. I smirked. That's what she gets. Karen's breakdown. It was just a garage. I later found out from another neighbor who had witnessed the scene that Karen had completely lost it when the police confronted her. Apparently, when the officers knocked on her door, she immediately started playing the victim, insisting that this was all some huge misunderstanding. She kept downplaying the whole thing, saying that Jake wasn't actually breaking in but was just checking if the garage was accessible. The cops weren't buying it. When they brought up the security footage, Karen's demeanor changed instantly. She went from trying to act innocent to furious. She started screaming about how I was overreacting and how it was just a garage and how I was so selfish for not letting her son use it. She even tried to play the single mother card again, saying that she was just doing what's best for her son. The cops didn't care. Jake, on the other hand, apparently looked terrified. The kid was 17, old enough to know better, but he clearly wasn't expecting to be caught. He kept apologizing, while Karen kept escalating. She even went so far as to demand that the police arrest me instead for harassment. That's when the officers told her she was as close to getting arrested herself. Eventually, the cops gave Karen a citation for trespassing and attempted unauthorized entry. Jake was also given a warning, but because he was a minor and this was technically his first offense, he was let off with just a recorded statement. However, if he tried anything again, the officer warned that he would be charged with attempted breaking and entering. That's when Karen really lost it. She started sobbing dramatically, claiming that I had ruined her life and that I was punishing a good kid for no reason. She even tried to throw Jake under the bus, saying it was all his idea and that she had nothing to do with it, completely ignoring the fact that I had video proof of her standing there watching him. The cops told her to quit while she was ahead. The HOA gets involved. Karen tries one last time. Now! You'd think that would be the end of it. Karen had been caught, her son had been warned, and she had officially been cited for trespassing. But no! This is Karen we're talking about. A few days after the police visit, I received an email from the HOA. Apparently, Karen had filed a complaint against me. Her claim? That my garage was an eyesore and that I was violating community guidelines by leaving it unused. I had to laugh. This woman was relentless. Luckily, my HOA isn't the type to just blindly side with people like Karen. I sent them the police report, the security footage, and a detailed email explaining the entire situation. Within 24 hours, the HOA responded, completely shutting her down. Their response was hilarious. They told her in no uncertain terms that, "My property is mine to use however I see fit. There are no community rules stating that a garage must be used for parking. Attempting to break into a neighbor's garage is a far bigger offense than an empty-looking space." They even went so far as to warn her that if she continued filing frivolous complaints, she could face disciplinary action from the HOA. She lost. And she was not happy. I caught her glaring at me from her window later that evening, but she didn't say a word. She had officially burned every bridge. The final nail in the coffin, Karen's karma. About a month later, I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that Karen and Jake were moving. Apparently, she had been having financial troubles, and after racking up fines from the HOA and possibly the police citation, she could no longer afford to stay in the neighborhood. She tried to sell her house, but her reputation was so bad that people actively avoided buying it. In the end, She was forced to rent it out, meaning she had to deal with the new tenants instead of leaving completely. I saw her one last time before she left. She was loading boxes into a moving truck, scowling the entire time. When she saw me, she actually flipped me off. I just smiled and waved. Good riddance, Karen. Epilogue. Peace at last. Ever since Karen left, the neighborhood has been so much quieter. No more HOA complaints, no more random demands, no more entitled screaming. It's been bliss. As for my garage, I still use it for my own stuff, just as I always have. And best of all, no one has ever dared to knock on my door at 5 a.m. ever again.